Our story begins with Victor Von Doom's self-constructed statue. Reed and Ben examine it before entering the building. Reed gives a presentation explaining that a high-energy cosmic storm caused the evolution of early planetary life and that another cloud will pass through Earth's orbit in 6 weeks. He emphasizes that space research can be conducted to find solutions to many human problems. However, Victor, who has listened to the presentation, demands Reed finish, reminding him of his previous bankruptcy. Reed adds that the shields in Victor's station control room would be perfect for such a project. Victor, once again negatively but confidently, states that he knows NASA rejected Reed. Ben wants to leave, but Reed insists. At this point, Sue Storm, Victor's director of genetic research, enters the room. She hugs Ben, but exchanges a cold greeting with Reed. It's clear they have a history. Knowing that Reed came to him as a last resort, Victor negotiates a deal to keep most of the investment to himself. His right-hand man, Leonard, arrives and warns that the deal might be risky, but Victor assures him that Reed is never wrong when it comes to science. Reed and Sue engage in a sweet exchange of words. When Reed says they're considering Ben as the pilot, Sue says he can handle the shotgun, as they've already hired his brother, Johnny, as the pilot. Ben, watching Johnny arrive while kissing a girl, gets angry and says he can't work with someone like him, but Reed tries to convince him. While Ben is looking at his wife Debbie's photo, Johnny enters the hallway, tricking him by saying, "Captain on the bridge," and taking his photo. Ben wants to be angry, but he says it's the suit they have to wear that really irritates him. Sue says that these synthetics act like a second skin and adapt to their body's individual needs, which intrigues Reed a lot. The spacecraft arrives at the station. ETA until the cosmic event is 9 hours away. As the team advances, Reed stares at Earth from afar. When they arrive at the control center, Victor mocks Ben for constantly running errands for Reed. Johnny helps Ben into a special suit, expressing his hope that Reed and his sister Sue won't get back together, adding that he's already certain he'll lose when he compares Reed to Victor. He secures the airlock chamber.
Victor tells Sue that accepting Reed's offer was merely business, kisses her hand, and then lifts the curtains around them.
Reed sees that the computer suddenly passes 9 minutes of information for the event threshold instead of 7 hours. Just as Victor proposes to Sue and hasn't received her response, Reed arrives and tells them the event is minutes away. Victor tells him to calm down and says they need to lower the shields. Reed says they need to get Ben inside first, so he runs to warn Johnny and him. Ben, seeing that he won't make it on time, jumps for the portal. Sue, furious with Victor for activating the shields before the others have even entered the control room, runs out. Ben manages to enter the portal at the last minute and Johnny closes it. Ben then collapses as the cosmic storm begins to engulf the station. The storm tears through the station, striking Reed, Johnny, and Sue. Ben wakes up to find Johnny at his bedside. He learns they're quarantined at Victor's medical facility on Earth. When Johnny says everyone except Ben is fine, Ben curiously asks what's wrong. He looks in the mirror and sees nothing wrong with his face. Johnny scoffs, saying even the best surgeons couldn't fix his face, and runs off. He mentions that Reed, whom he met in the hallway, has gray hair now. Reed goes into Sue's room and learns from her doctor that her condition is stable. Victor has sent a room full of flowers, and Reed asks the maids not to place the species Sue is allergic to near her. Investment banker Ned says that Victor caused a free fall after what happened, and if the situation is not corrected within a week, they will pull out. When the nurse sees Johnny getting dressed and getting ready to ski, she tells him he can't leave before they get the test results, but he doesn't listen. When she takes his temperature, she finds it's far above normal, but before she knows it, her patient disappears. Ben finally gets up and walks out. Reed tells him he's done the calculations over and over again, but couldn't figure out what caused this. Ben advises him to talk to Sue before he faces death again, but Reed tells him she's with Victor now and everyone is happy. Johnny and the nurse wait for the helicopter to adjust its position and then jump off. After sliding a short distance, Johnny's clothes begin to burn, and while the nurse tries to warn him, she gets distracted and falls. Realizing he's burning, Johnny panics and begins to fall down a cliff, ultimately burning completely and crashing into the snow. When the nurse reaches him, she finds him buried in the ice, which has melted from the heat. Ben notifies them both separately and brings Reed and Sue to the restaurant. Victor learns from Leonard that IPO's condition is relatively good after the recent incident. Victor wants to have the wound on his face dressed before press shooting. When he goes to the table, his hands become electrified. Halfway through the meal, Ben feels like he got sick and leaves the table, leaving Reed and Sue alone. Meanwhile, Victor is waiting for Sue. Reed saying that he's happy for Victor and Sue angers her. He sees the woman suddenly disappear and catches the bottle she dropped in panic, with his arm getting unusually long. When both of them return to their normal state, Johnny appears half naked and says they won't believe what just happened. Victor, impatient with waiting, notices that his hair is falling out and sees that the lights are affected when he touches the metal of the mirror. Ben experiences excruciating pain. While Sue and Reed discuss what's happening, Johnny shows them a fire he lit with his finger. They then confirm that Cloud has altered their DNA. They go straight to Ben. He's in bed, his weight increasing as his pain intensifies. Sue stops Johnny. Meanwhile, they hear Ben's bed breaking and they try to get in. Reed manages to open the door by reaching under the door as if he were stretching a rubber band. When they enter, they see the wall of the room split open and something running towards the forest. Victor arrives and asks what happened, doesn't tell them what happened to him, tells them to find Ben and leaves. Reed thinks he might have gone to his house.
Ben, with his massive body getting into the city, arrives at the train station. He steals large clothes from a store and goes to a phone booth, but his fingers are too large for the buttons. He asks the operator for help and calls his wife, Debbie, downstairs, who gets surprised by her husband's deep voice. Ben finally appears, albeit with some hesitation, but his wife runs away in fear. Bystanders call the police. Ben walks away. Reed, Sue, and Johnny take a taxi to Ben's house. As Ben sits on the edge of the bridge, a bird lands on him, dropping its feces and flying away. Meanwhile, a man who has come right next to him, intending to commit suicide, throws his bag into the sea and runs away in fear when he sees Ben. Although Ben tries to calm him down, the man becomes even more frightened and falls into the middle of the road. To protect him, Ben jumps onto the road and stops a truck with his body that was about to run the man over. He pulls the man away, shielding him from the vehicles, but in the ensuing chaos, cars begin to crash into each other. Reed, Sue, and Johnny get out of the taxi in the traffic jam. Seeing the man's fear of him, Ben shouts angrily. As they can't get past the crowd, Reed tells them Sue can do it. Ben helps the passenger in the truck. Sue turns invisible and begins to take off her clothes, but before she can do it, she reappears. When Ben pulls the driver out with the seat, he's warned by the police. Sue turns invisible again, completely strips off her clothes, and fights her way through the crowd and the police. Ben takes advantage of the police's distraction to escape, barely even feeling the bullet coming at him. The rescue vehicle is speeding towards there. Sue and the others finally manage to cross to the other side, and when they call his name, they see Ben. Johnny makes a last-minute move and saves a little girl from a bursting gas tank. The rescue vehicle crashes. Sue unknowingly creates a protective shield around the explosion and even manages to steer it, but then she gets exhausted. The rescue team struggles to free themselves from their crashing vehicle, and Ben comes to their rescue. Reed spots a rescue team member about to fall and catches him in midair with his flexible body. Ben pulls the vehicle up with all his strength, saving it from the crash. Other teams arrive, and while the police hold guns on Ben, the others applaud. He spots his wife, Debbie, in the crowd. She refuses to let him approach her and leaves her engagement ring. When Ben can't retrieve the ring, Reed goes to help him, promising to do everything he can to restore it. While the team helps them, Johnny seriously asks Ben where his ears are. They learn that the press wants to talk to them and that they're being referred to as the Fantastic Four in the news. While the others are reluctant, Johnny goes straight to the press. They choose Reed as their spokesperson, and he begins talking about their work. Victor learns from Leonard and turns on the news. Johnny seems pleased with this, reiterating that they're the Fantastic Four, but Reed says this is serious and that they'll find a cure. After all this, Victor learns that the bank investors are pulling out, and he cannot convince them otherwise. When the Fantastic Four arrive at the Baxter building, they find it crowded. Johnny is the happiest, greeting everyone and telling Ben to do the same. The giant man tells the kids to stay away from drugs. When they enter, the elevator is blocked due to the wait, forcing Ben to take the stairs. Reed shows the others his office. Victor also arrives at the building, but avoids the reporter's questions. Sue sees photos of herself from the past among Reed's belongings in his room. Victor comes to her and offers to take her to his apartment, but Sue wants to stay with her brother. Meanwhile, Reed arrives and tells Victor they're starting the tests. When he tells him he's sorry for what happened, he's met with Victor's anger and the surrounding lights dimming and returning. When Ben asks if there's a problem, Victor says there isn't and leaves. When he gets to the elevator, he punches the wall in anger and sees his hand change. The Fantastic Four begin testing Johnny, first by placing him in a cage and examining him. They then discover that Ben's internal organs continue to function even when encased in stone. They discover that Sue can bend even the light around objects if she develops control. They measure Ben's reflexes. When they test Johnny again, he continues to heat up and refuses to stop. But when the temperature reaches 4,000 Kelvin, Reed is forced to extinguish him. Any warmer and he could reach supernova, the temperature of the sun, and destroy himself and everything around him. When Sue uses her invisibility, she focuses her anger, sending waves around, knocking Reed to the ground. She immediately goes to him and helps him to his feet. Their conversation turns to the reasons for their breakup in their past relationship, and we learn that Reed was previously hesitant in response to Sue's proposal to live together. At this point, Johnny arrives, wearing a burnt t-shirt. Victor visits a doctor and learns that his body's tissue, organs, and overall structure are transforming into a type of organic metallic alloy stronger than titanium, diamond, and carbon steel. The doctor tells him it will take 2 to 3 weeks for the transformation to complete, and that he must inform the Center for Disease Control because it could be contagious. However, Victor is displeased by this and argues that it will further strain his already struggling company, therefore neutralizes the doctor. Reed continues his calculations and examines the suits, finding that they too can withstand the same properties due to sun exposure on the space station. While out walking, Sue sees her own news item on the front page of a newspaper and is noticed by the public. Left with no choice but to escape the crowd, she takes off her clothes. Johnny comes and takes the juice Ben squeezed and complains about not being able to go outside. Reed and Sue warn him that it would be risky until he learns to control his powers. Ben tries to eat the fruit. Johnny tries to extinguish the napkin he burned. Reed explains that they can return to normal by reversing the cosmic ray's wave signal, but this experiment carries the risk of death. Ben realizes he even ate the fork. He becomes impatient and angry that Reed doesn't know when the cure will work. They try to adapt to living together as a team. Johnny pranks Ben by spraying foam on his hand. Reed uses his flexible body to gain an advantage even in his daily activities. News reports indicate that the group of investors are trying to gain control of Victor's companies. Meanwhile, Victor, whose body has transformed even further, finds his influence over electricity increasing and turns off all the lights. As Ned is about to get into his car, he notices that the lights are out of whack. He tells Victor, who is approaching him, that business decisions are nothing personal, just business. Without a word, Victor advances on him and ultimately kills Ned with an electric shock from his hand, saying it's nothing personal. Reed and his team continue their work. Johnny finally gets tired of being stuck inside a building and wants to get out. A thug standing next to him in traffic wants to race him and badmouths him, but he melts the tires off the guy's car and continues on his way. He goes to the motorcycle show he saw on TV and joins in. The crowd demands he show something different, and this time, Johnny gets fired up and jumps even higher. However, when he loses control of his bike, he resorts to setting himself on fire. For a moment, it looks like he'll fly, but he finally crashes. Seeing he is good, the crowd cheers even more. Giving an interview, he gives nicknames to the Fantastic Four members, choosing the coolest one for himself and simply calling Ben the Thing. Ben, enraged, declares he'll kill him.
While Sue and Reed go to restrain him, Ben goes to Johnny's car, rolls it into a ball, throws the license plate at Johnny's head. Reed and Sue try to calm them down. Ben stops just as he's about to punch him, walks back, but when Johnny throws a series of flames at him, he angrily turns back and punches him through Reed as he steps in front of him. Just as they're about to fight again, Sue gets angry and steps between them. Reed talks to Johnny, urging him to be cautious, but he doesn't get the response he expects. Sue goes after Ben, telling him Reed will find the cure, but Ben yells at everyone around him, saying he's tired of waiting and wants his old life back. Victor, who entered a facility belonging to his company and neutralized the employees, says he needs a few things for his friends and stops in front of the hypercooling unit. Ben goes to a bar and tries to sit down, but the chair breaks. He stands up and tells everyone around him that this isn't funny. He asks for his usual drink, and the woman at the next table charges him. Ben thanks her, but the glass breaks when he picks it up. He blames God, but the woman doesn't approve of this. She approaches him to get to know him in her own way and is astonished when she touches his stone body. She tries to reassure him, but Ben refuses. She then says goodbye and leaves. Before getting out of the bar, she tells him her name is Alicia. Victor curses Reed when he is by himself, watching him through the cameras he placed in his office, saying he must destroy him after eliminating the ones who will protect him. He goes up to Ben, who is sitting alone in a restaurant, and says he wants to buy him something to eat. Sue wakes Reed, whose face is stretched from sleeping on. She asks him how the tests are going, and seeing that Reed is struggling, takes him outside to the place where they had their first date. She tells him that she and Victor were never a thing, and encourages Reed to kiss her, but she also becomes invisible. Victor tries to persuade Ben, attributing Reed's lack of a cure to his desire to spend more time with Sue. Later in the office, Ben becomes enraged at Reed for not having found the cure. When Reed tells him they shouldn't move until they're certain of everything, Ben throws his friend to the ground. Reed attacks him, wrapping his flexible body around Ben. Ben tries to break free but fails and ends up trapped. Once Reed is satisfied that Ben is calmed down, he releases him. Ben tells them they're on their own and leaves. He runs into Johnny, who is mocking him by showing off his toy, and angrily breaks it. Sue, looking for Ben, asks him about him, but when she sees her brother also wanting to leave, she can't resist anymore and argues with him. Reed eventually decides to use himself as a test subject. Sue, sensing this from the building's electrical leaks, rushes there. Victor is watching from another building. Reed emerges from the capsule, initially normal, but then half of his body begins to sag, as if melting. He tells Sue that if he has more power, he can make it. Victor, watching from the camera, calls Leonard and asks him to bring Ben.
Victor meets Ben in Reed's lab and tells him that Reed is with Sue, as always, and that he failed his attempt due to insufficient power, but that he can fix it himself. Ben, wanting to escape this situation, reluctantly agrees. When Victor activates the machine, he soon sees that the power is insufficient and activates the source, supplementing it with his own power. This time, the electrical leakage isn't just in the building, but throughout the city. Therefore, Johnny runs there too. Ben finally emerges from the capsule and regains his normal body. He puts on his clothes and searches for Victor. Victor approaches Ben, the metallizations clearly visible on his body, and tells him about his plan to achieve unlimited power, then strikes him. Reed arrives and tells him to stop. Victor also fires an electric shock at him, missing the first time, but throwing him off the building with the second. Reed tries to grab the building where he fell, but due to his last experiment, he loses full control of his body and slumps to the ground. Victor climbs down and throws the attendant out. He grabs Reed and tries to take him away, but seeing the deformation on his own face, he goes to put on his mask first. Sue and Johnny rush to Ben's aid and find that the machine has worked. Ben tells them what happened and what Victor did. Victor has Reed hooked up to the hypercooling unit and asks him what happens when he supercools rubber. He bends Reed's finger backwards, causing him to suffer. Johnny and Sue try to understand what happened from the damages in the building. Victor takes a gun he stole from his company and fires it at the Baxter building. Johnny looks down from the building, wondering what he can do, and ignoring Sue's anger, he jumps down and takes the guided missile after him. Just before he hits the ground, he bursts into flames and begins flying. Ben tells Reed they need to help, but Sue tells him to stay here as it will be dangerous for him, and leaves. Ben looks at the machine. When Johnny reaches a building, he begins a powerful maneuver, climbing skyward. He fires a fireball into the air, trying to deceive the missile by extinguishing his own flames. It works for a moment, but the missile returns to pursue him. Johnny is engulfed in flames again, and navigating through the buildings, guides the missile out to sea. Looking around, he spots an unmanned barge, setting it ablaze, deceiving the missile. He falls into the sea from the explosion. Victor sees the explosion and thinks Johnny is dead. When Sue, invisible, comes to Reed's rescue, Victor realizes this. He demands Sue call him Doom. He tells her they've become gods, but Sue resists, sending a wave at him. Doom counters with an electric shock, and Sue falls to the ground, becoming invisible again. When she tries to send waves at him from where she is, Doom tackles her and grabs her by the throat. He throws her to Reed, telling them it's time to end this. Ben, now restored to his fantastic form again, bursts through the wall and punches him, telling him it's clobbering time. Doom is trapped under the structure where he hit. Ben and Sue rescue Reed from the machine. The power goes out, and Victor pounces on Ben, plummeting down the building and landing in another building's pool. Their weight causes the pool to collapse, and at the last moment, they bypass a hotel resident who escapes down the hallway and are swept away by the pool's water and onto a passing truck in the street. After fighting inside the vehicle, Doom throws Ben out. He lands on a car carrying two women.
Doom gets out and throws electricity at the police car as they tell him to surrender. The police fire bullets at Doom, further angering him. Ben tells the two women he'll borrow their car and throws it at Doom. A traffic jam ensues. Doom gets out of the bus he's found himself in and blocks Ben's rush with a piece of metal. Just as he's about to stab Ben with the metal, he hears Reed approaching. He ignores him and turns back to Ben, but Sue blocks him with her protective shield. Johnny then flies over and shoots Doom, landing on the street. Ben gets up and the Fantastic Four stand before Doom. Doom creates an electric field, first shooting electricity at Johnny, then at Ben. But when it comes to Sue, he's met with a shield. Meanwhile, Reed throws a box at Doom, rolls like a wheel, and wraps around him like a blanket. He tells Johnny to go supernova and asks Ben to pull him. Johnny spins around Doom, creating a circular flame trap, which Sue contains. But after holding on for a while, she becomes exhausted and suffers a nosebleed. Johnny, exhausted too, falls to the road. Doom's metal body is overheated, but he's still standing, and he asks if this is the best they can do. Reed asks him what happens when heated metal suddenly cools, and Ben breaks a fire hydrant, directing the water at Reed, who in turn directs it at Doom. Smoke billows around the area, and after a moment, Ben shuts off the hydrant. Doom is frozen solid, unable to move. The Fantastic Four gather together and acknowledge the applause of the crowd surrounding them. A party is thrown for them. Johnny is surrounded by women. Ben doesn't want Reed tinkering with the machine anymore. When he tries to say cheers, he inadvertently breaks Alicia's glass. Reed wants to talk to Sue. He tells her he's found a broken gasket from space. Sue initially thinks he's talking about another scientific study, but Reed shows her the ring-shaped gasket he's holding. He gets down on one knee and proposes. Sue disappears, puts the ring on her finger, and says yes. When Reed makes a move, he kisses her on the nose. Sue reappears, corrects the situation, and kisses him on the lips. The partygoers gather round to watch. Johnny mocks Ben's size again and flies off, suddenly engulfed in flames, tracing the Fantastic Four symbol in the sky. Meanwhile, Leonard places Doom in a container. The staff's electronics malfunction. From their conversation, we learn that the ship will arrive in Latveria after a 12-day journey, and the story ends here.